Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to today's Tuesdays with Taylor. I am here with Kareem. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Kareem.
Kareem, he is an owner, a farmer here, and let us know where we are. Where are we? And please make sure we're getting all of this in the background. This is his beautiful vineyard. Kareem, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Taylor. Great to have you here. Thank you for visiting. I'm Kareem Massoud. I'm a second-generation winemaker here at Paumanok Vineyards. It's my family's business. I learned from my father. My brothers, Nabil and Salim, are also very much involved in our business. My brother Nabil is our vineyard manager. My brother Salim is our office manager. I'm the winemaker for both Paumanok, where we are now, and also Palmer Vineyards, which we also own and operate a mile and 3/4 north of us over there. And so what we have here, this vineyard right here is Sauvignon Blanc, planted by our parents in '84. We have Riesling over there, planted in '83. And so at Paumanok today, we're up to around 80 acres of vineyards.
80 acres?
And,
wow.
At Palmer, we have another 49. So that's a lot of work and keeps us busy.
This is amazing. How big is this?
So this is our home farm, so to speak. It's about 42 acres. Not all of it's planted right now. We have about 20 acres planted. I say right now because we actually tore out some vineyards last year. That brought the number down a little, but where the key sort of takeaway message is that we're an estate winery. And so what does that mean? That means we only use grapes that we grow here to make our wine. We don't buy grapes from anywhere. We don't really sell grapes. We only use what we grow here to make our wine.
And Long Island is a good place to grow grapes.
Long Island's a great place to grow grapes.
Okay.
And what makes it so is that we have a temperate climate, where we have a maritime climate, where these bodies of water, the Atlantic, the Sound, and the Bay, they help moderate the temperature. And the winters aren't that cold as compared to further inland, and they're not as because the bodies of water basically, like especially the Atlantic is really what we're talking about. It acts like a giant air conditioner. The fruit from wildlife in particular, we're talking about birds.
Wow.
And so the birds are a real nuisance to the point where the cost of putting up these nets on the entire property is exceeded by what we would lose by bird damage, and that's why we go through the trouble.
Yeah, definitely. So birds. What else is eating grapes? Do deer eat grapes?
Deer are a problem, and so we have 4 main properties at Paumanok, and 3 of them are fully fenced in with a deer fence. Mm-hmm. This is the only one where there is no deer fence. But the deer, they can be bad news too. But the birds are really a major nuisance because they'll destroy our crop, and that's why we have the bird netting.
Well, and now what type of grapes are these?
So this is Sauvignon Blanc, planted in '84.
Oh my God.
And
he was born in '84.
Yeah, cool. So what's today? August 12th. So we'll be harvesting these grapes in about 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah, probably more like 6. It could be 5 or 6 weeks.
Now, how many of these bunches do you need for 1 bottle of wine?
That's a good question. It's approximately a dozen. Or to 2 dozen, and so per vine you're going to get 1 to 2 bottles, maybe 3 or 4 bottles. Depends on the yield.
Well, and how fast do they grow? Do you get out? Is it just once a year that they're growing?
The crop is once a year in most parts of the world. There's some exceptions in other parts of the world, but usually you get 1 crop per year. And so these vines, like I said, were planted in '84. And but I like to say they're a lot like us, like humans, in terms of the life expectancy. We hope that the vineyards are going to be decades old, and you read about old vineyards that are 70, 80, 90 years old. And I like to say, just like us, as they get older, they become less productive, but more charismatic and more complex.
Yes.
And the more youthful vineyards are more exuberant and more fresh, and they yield a lot more.
You get that crisp, that burst of flavor, but here you'll get some nice complex notes.
Exactly.
It is so true. Grapes is people. I love that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So show us whatever you want to show us. We're here to learn.
I would say let's go up on the balcony. You get a nice view of the property.
Let's do that then.
So we own all the way into the woods there. You see the 2 barns there?
Oh yes.
The 2 roof lines. Those are both covered in solar panels, and in addition.
So is this one?
Yep. And so all together, we're now 100% solar powered with
wonderful.
With the 2 barns in the back.
100% solar powered. And how much money do you think that saves you guys over?
Financially, our electric bill would normally be $1,000 to $2,000 a month, and this basically wipes it out.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Tank, we call it our tank room or tank hall. I mean, these people call them fermentation vats or tanks. It's all stainless steel. And actually right now you can see this has wine in it.
Oh my, it's like an IV bag.
I never thought of it quite like that.
He's an RN, so I always think of IVs.
But yeah, exactly. I always tell people, like, they're like, can I drink as much as I want? Well, be careful what you wish for. This is a 1,000-gallon tank. That's a 2,000-gallon tank.
2,000 gallons. I love this one.
You can see this one. It's almost full. You see?
Oh, that's the indicator.
Yeah, that's the sight gauge that shows us how full it is.
So why is this one like hammered metal? I love how that looks.
So some of them don't have the sight gauge, or it's just a different pattern. There's not much rhyme or reason to the finish on the tank. It's just the way the welders have made it. It's just a different technique.
It's so funny. We just saw a backsplash for a bath kitchen.
Yeah.
That looked like they did the work on the. It's so nice.
I actually have something kind of similar, and I'll show you in a second.
This is amazing.
I mean, what you really should do, if you can, is come back in September and October, because that's for harvesting. And look at that. It's really interactive here in terms of your senses. As it is now, you can hear the fans, but that's much more boring than hearing the tank, the barrels bubbling, and smelling it, and tasting it, and seeing it.
The fermentation process.
Yeah. You really can engage with all of your senses. It's very interactive and delicious.
Wait, can someone steps up there and puts stuff in it?
So that's our catwalk. Exactly.
Oh.
So that makes things much more productive. That was a custom thing we added a few years after we built this room, and it's much more productive to be able to. So before that, we would do it like this. Like have poses on our shoulder.
That's not safe either.
Yeah.
Oh my
You mentioned the backsplash. We had this thing custom made too out of stainless steel, and all of our stainless steel fittings go on here. When they've been sanitized. So we know when you pick something off there, it's nice and clean.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so as my father says, winemaking is 90% cleaning and 10% fun.
Wow.
I might have to revise that to 95 and 5.
Because I'm waiting for the fun, the 10% of fun.
It's mostly cleaning. We clean before we use something, we clean after we use it, and it's got to be sanitized to the point you could eat all, like the same way in the restaurant kitchen they use like a stainless steel backsplash, like you mentioned. Same thing here, like with the everything you see that's stainless is completely sanitized before we use it.
Wow. How often in this with the FDA, who comes in regulation?
It's
The health department?
the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets is and on the state level, and then on the federal level will be USDA. And then we have with alcohol with the feds, it's a division of the Treasury, Department of Treasury. It's called the Tax and Trade Bureau. We call it TTB for short. Tax and Trade Bureau, Alcohol Beverage Control, to be exact.
That's a lot of people regulating.
Yes, exactly. It's alcohol. We have multiple layers of regulation. It is what it is. But yeah.
And these are your bottles?
Yes, these are some of our wines over here. And so the bottling room is right over here. And so when we bottle some of the finished product, we store it here. But yes, these are some Paumanok wines here. And this here is unlabeled, but this is more dirt wine. And
This is so cool.
Now, how many different types of wine do you make here?
we make quite a few at Paumanok. At Paumanok, we will produce up to 24 in a given vintage. And over time, you could say we've made up to 36. Some of them are just like one time, like we had like a 30th anniversary, which we only do once. Like our 93 late harvest Chenin Blanc, we only made that once. And so like our core portfolio, you could say, is like 16 to 18 wines that we make almost every year. And that's just at Paumanok. At Palmer Vineyards, which we also own and operate, we also make at least a dozen, maybe 18 to 20 wines, depending on the vintage. So you add it all up, it's a lot of work. So for me, I enjoy being prolific, doing a lot of stuff, but it's
You're always moving. There's always something to do.
It's a little bit masochistic. It's a lot of work.
Oh, we know we kind of work in politics, so we know it's a never-ending cycle of do it.
That's what this is. This is a never-ending cycle as well.
Never-ending cycle.
Where as my father says, winemaking is less of an art and more of a partnership with Mother Nature. Oh. Unfortunately, she's the senior partner.
No, it's true. How much has climate change impacted the vineyard? Like, tell me where we're at like 30 years ago versus 2020, the epic 2020.
Yeah. That's a great question, and climate change is definitely having a real impact already. But to answer your question, like 25, 30 years ago, things were a little bit more predictable. I mean, you can't really predict the weather, obviously, but there's certain metrics by which we've seen significant change. Like we never really saw bud break, which was like the start of our growing season, until really the first week in May. But over the last few years, the last 10, 15 years or so, we've seen that advance, where we've seen in 2010 we had bud break the second week in April.
Yeah.
And over some of the other years we also saw earlier and earlier bud breaks. And the weather, it's consistent with what we know about climate change. We see more extreme weather events. We're seeing these so-called once in 100-year rain events, which we see every 5 or 10 years.
Every minute, every week.
It's like every 5 years is a 100-year rain event, or you know what I mean? And so, and timing matters a great deal in what we do. So if it rains, like a big rain like that, after we're done harvesting, we don't really care so much. But if the grapes are still out there, that can be a big problem. And but the bigger issues are, that the temperature is rising. And so in that regard, Long Island as a cool climate wine region is relatively well positioned. Like we can handle some warming, whereas some of the hot wine districts of the world are already getting too hot. Like famous places like Napa. Napa and the valley floor in Napa, it's getting so hot now they can't really continue growing wine grapes. It's like a huge deal.
So there's going to be an even bigger demand for grapes from other regions or wines from other regions and overseas, potentially.
I mean, that wouldn't be untrue what you said. I mean, we're not necessarily counting on that, but yeah, there's truth to that for sure. I mean, the writing it's already been on the wall. It's already happening that some of these hot districts are just getting too hot. And so anyway, Long Island is fairly well positioned on one hand. On the other hand, I'm troubled by what we're seeing right now, which is we have a lot of warm nights. We want to see the nights stay cool. And year after year now, the last 3 or 4 years in a row, I've really been troubled that the frequency of these warm nights that we're having. It's not like a deal breaker, but it's also not ideal. We'd rather see cooler nights. And in fact, like 2020 as a social, political year is crazy, but as far as a growing season for us so far, it's looking very, very promising.
Oh, good. Something going right. Something going right in 2020. Thank God. Let's turn to that.
In spite of the warm nights we've had and the humidity, which is a big problem. But other than that, we've had everything we want, which is hot weather, very dry weather, breezy weather. We've had all that, and that's key. And so that's exciting. Some barrels earlier today. Racking, meaning we transfer the wine from one vessel to another. In this case, we were pumping out of the barrel up into those tanks we have. And so on the way, see this pipeline here, this steel tube?
Oh, that's so cool.
That's how the wine comes down. So when we fill the barrel, we use gravity, and on the way back up, we pump it. And so we did that earlier today, and now we're washing the barrels, and you can smell that aroma of wine.
Smells great.
I mean, you could come for a wine tasting and enjoy your wine tasting with some of the artisanal cheeses we offer and charcuterie, and that's what folks are doing 7 days a week now since we reopened in mid-June, and it's been going quite well because I think a lot of Long Islanders and New Yorkers are going nowhere.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not flying anywhere.
No.
And the East End is. I mean, Long Island has so much to offer.
Sure does.
And so one of the things is that people might be flying away to would be a wine experience at a vineyard, and you can have that right here.
We can drive straight from where we are in District 18, right up the southern state, to come to this beautiful vineyard and to support our farmers. Like, our farmers really need our support with climate change, with just all the uncertainties we deal with. This is our food, this is our wine, these are our this is our lifeline, really. So how we can support it is, I think, just coming out to experience it. So it's very important to meet with you today, and thank you for being a farmer. Thank you for staying. I know there have been some great times as a farmer in Long Island, and there have been some challenging times. He tried to tell me, listen, This is not a glamorous job. If you think you want a vineyard or a farm, you are gonna work around the clock. So we have to really support our farmers who are here, where we can get fresh food from a place we trust in real time with the least amount of impact to the environment. So thank you so much, Kareem.
Thank you.
We look forward to experiencing the vineyard.
Thank you.